Hey everybody, it's Paul Grossman, the Dark Arts Wizard, and welcome to another monthly meetup with Zapple Tech. If you might have noticed, we have a black screen up on our image over there. Whenever we do these things, you never know what's going to happen. And today, my camera has decided it doesn't want to work. I'm really sad about that because I really wanted to show off a couple of things that are playing around in my room over here. So we're going to have to do this the old-fashioned way, like it was radio. And I'm always happy to be able to try and deal with and roll with the punches as we go along here. I hope you can bear with me a little bit. Today we have got two great speakers for us. Coming up in our second hour, we've got Ewa Marchewka, who's going to be talking with us about some automation coding stuff. And then leading off, we've got Alex Pshe. I hope I pronounced that last name correctly. It's and she's going to be talking to us about some automations. I happen to notice that she is actually an SDET and product manager IDE for QA at JetBrains, which is kind of cool. Today, she's kind of as a independent for us, talking with us today. I'm really happy to kind of introduce her here. And Alex, yeah, I know. Alex, I got my moderators in here and say, Alex goes first. I'm like, yeah, I know. I'm just trying to get everybody ready because as some of you may not know, we do this for 2 hours. It's 1 hour with one speaker and and then a second speaker. So I do like to let everybody know we do have two speakers and we do have cool stuff coming up over here. Something I will let you know, you can take a look and view us at two different places. You can see us through this LinkedIn. If you're looking at through here is a LinkedIn live session that you can check us out over here. And you can actually ask us questions live as we're going through. And if you're not there, you might be watching us through YouTube. So we do also have a YouTube live link that's out there. And also, please feel free, ask questions because we are live. And once our presenter is done, we will have them answer questions. Anything that you've thrown in along the way, we'll bring them up and have them answer questions over here. So Alex is, I believe, in our ready room and is getting ready. I guess we're going to see if we can get Alex's camera and the screen up there. I can see Alex. Hi, Alex. How you doing?
Hey, I'm great. Yeah, I was really laughing about your screen. This is always happened during QA events, so it's so funny.
Oh man, I will tell you, I've seen a connection. I work in QA, and I always look for connections. And I'm going to put the blame here on a small company you may not have heard of it called Microsoft. This morning, I'm looking at my system, and it's got a little red dot saying, "Hey, we've got some updates for you." And I'm like, "Oh boy, things never quite go right when there's an update waiting." I was 30 minutes prepared and everything. So now what I got to do, I got to go out and buy myself a camera as a backup. So I will never be in this situation again. Alex, why don't you introduce yourself, give us a little background, and if you've got a screen to share, why don't you do that? And then I'll let you, go on ahead and take over.
Yeah, I think actually we can start. So yeah, we can show my screen and I will tell a little bit later about myself also.
Absolutely.
Yeah, great. So
You're great.
yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah, so hello everybody. I'm really glad to see you today, and I'm going to discuss very interesting topic, 10 best practices for building web applications, test automation from the scratch. And as it's like we have a lot of information for today, and I hope we will be in time. So let's start. So my name is Alex Pshe, and yeah, I'm QA automation expert. So I personally built test automation from the scratch in more than 50 projects for different web applications. So actually this guide will be developed definitely based on my previous experience. And also, I'm really big fan of quality assurance, and that's why I'm here. That's why I'm always willing to share my knowledge with our people also. So yeah, you can scan a QR code here if you want to follow my social media. Yeah, you are always welcome. So coming back to our topic today, imagine the situation. For example, you just joined the team and your task is to build from the scratch test automation for web application. So I think I can assume that you will face a lot of different, quite complicated questions, like how to choose the tool, how to lay down scalability, really difficult question, how to build perfect test architecture, how to prepare test data, which programming language to use for backend test automation, for front-end test automation, and how invest into your test stability, because we know that it's one of the most important parts of a test in general. And yeah, like a lot of different questions. Normally, we don't know where to start, and it's very obvious because most of these things you can know only from your previous experience. So that's why I think it's so important to share my experience here with you. And yeah, I prepared the guide with 10 best practices, and we will go with this particular plan. So we will discuss problem, we will discuss after best practice, and after some like steps how to introduce this best practice into your project. Yeah, and I try to do it very like how to say, like I try to prepare some real advices, not like very general advices, but real steps, like what you need to do in your particular project to start today. So if you need to build web application, auto test from scratch, you just open this guide and follow it. And yeah, I hope you are ready. So let's start. The biggest problem which I faced is testability. And unfortunately, it's not the thing that like our QA think a lot about. And how usually it looks. We rush to create a lot of new autotests from the beginning, without analysis, without scalability points, just like to create autotests as many as possible directly from the beginning. And our application doesn't deploy in isolation. So it means we cannot run our application locally, for example, and that's why, of course, we cannot run our application in a continuous integration system. So as a result, actually, tests are totally useless, because if we cannot to get the test result or the test status on the particular commit or merge request or pull request, it means actually we have tests, but they are isolated from the whole project, and the status of this test doesn't affect at all our delivery process. So it's a problem. And what is the best practice? So very simple, but sometimes it requires really a lot of resources from different departments. But we should set up CI/CD and test coverage from the beginning. Like, okay, test coverage can be like 0 or 1%. It's okay. We will increase it step by step in future, but we must set up it from the beginning. It's just like statement. We should do it. And the solution, how we can do it? We should invest time in deploying the application locally. It's the first step always. Like we should, for example, run one bash script or one command in terminal, and after that, our application can be deployed in our local machine. After that, we will catch lack of infrastructure or test endpoints. For example, here and here we can set up data only manually, and of course, in this case, we cannot automate it, so we should create new test endpoints. We should ask developers to add some additional information in the code for testing purposes. And as a final step, bash script for launching. So we set up a CI/CD pipeline with this bash script after. So it's our first problem and what we should do with it. The next problem is the lack of analysis of the entire testing pyramid from the beginning. So when we, for example, choosing a programming language for backend and front-end tests, when we deciding whatever to store tests with our product code or not, or separately in another repository, or when we decided how to create our test cases, I mean, like how to decompose them on different levels of testing pyramid, on API level, on UI level, or maybe some of these tests can be introduced in unit testing level. So as a result, we can have inefficient testing. And how we can solve this problem? So of course, we must think about reusing structures at each level of testing. So what I mean, first of all, we should choose as a programming language, backend programming language. Actually, we can have different strategies, and in general, usually it's 3 different strategies when we have backend programming language the same as the programming language for tests, front-end programming language the same as the programming language for tests, or also it can be 2 different programming languages for tests on backend and front-end side. So based on my personal experience, the best solution in terms of reusing existing code is to choose for test the programming language of backend. Why? Because in this case, we can reuse all necessary code, like data classes for API, like API requests from our product code. And also we can do it if we store our tests in the same repository with our product code. And after that, we can cover all user flows at the API level. And also on the UI level, we will check not all user flows, but only the integration between API and UI. Why it will work? Just because we guarantee that all user flows are working, because we already tested it on API level. So for UI, everything we need actually is just to test integration between UI and API, and that's all. So yeah, it's our solution based on my overall experience. The next problem is scalability points. And why it's a problem? Because before, when we just started, we don't analyze at all endpoints and how it will expand in the future. But it's quite important, because based on this, we can predict some scalability points in our project. So when new functionality appears, test framework needs to be fundamentally rewritten. So it means like we should create everything from the scratch, and sometimes we should change all previous classes and maybe even start from the scratch again. So we have a really big absence of any scalability, and that's our problem. So how we can solve it? We can analyze all the functionality together and plan a scalable test architecture before. So how we can do it exactly? So we should analyze all endpoints and web pages and find patterns. Unfortunately, I don't have a lot of time here today, but maybe next time I will show you on examples how you can do it. But basically, it's about, like, for example, we notice that for every endpoint, we will always create 4 methods, like CRUD, create, delete, update, and read. And in this case, we can say, like, okay, we can create some interface which will require all new requests to implement all these methods. So we can find some patterns, And we can use like design patterns or also some features from programming language to support these patterns, and also to write a framework that requires to follow these patterns. Like, for example, if I just joined the project and I decided to create new test, I must implement all these like patterns, all these methods, because it's interface, and based on language, for example, in Java, you must implement your interface methods. So yeah, it means like your framework kind of explain how to write new tests, and all these patterns contains these scalability points. So I hope the idea is like clear here. And the next problem, which also we can face a lot, it's a test data problem. So what I mean here, for example, we have hard-coded test data in each test, or not in each test, but sometimes we have some hard-coded data. And first of all, the problem is that we have this paradox, which explain us that if we use the same data for each new test, in this case, finally, test will not catch any new bugs. So we know probably this rule. Yeah, but also another problem, and more maybe even a more important problem, is that we will have in this case a lot of data conflicts and also inconsistency of our environments. And it will lead finally to test instability. So as you know, probably stability of tests is one of the most important criteria for our tests, because otherwise it became like expensive and like it became pretty inefficient. So how we can solve this problem? We should generate any test data, and maybe it sounds a little bit unrealistic, but actually it's possible. You just have to invest enough time from the beginning to build infrastructure to do it on the fly, and that's all. And what can be the possible solution for such approach? So first of all, you can build all test data based on data classes. I think it's already a very well-known best practice, and everyone does it. So yeah, it's the first step. After that, you can do some automatic generator for all data classes. What does it mean? With different programming languages, you can create such structure. I provide you the name of data class, and you provide me as a result, as a response, this data class, the object of this data class, with all generated data based on types, based on maybe some other heuristics, like, I don't know, maybe if it's street, it should be a real street name. If it's name, it should be real name. We have enough different fakers and data generators, and we can do it technically. It's not a problem. So we should invest our time to generate our data from the beginning, and not generate it in custom way, like for every data class, but to create some common way for generation based on the type of data class. So it's possible, and I really recommend you to invest time into this process. So, and after that, we can modify test-specific data. I mean, the data that we need for a particular test case inside this test case on the top of this generated data. So we generate everything, and after that, we can say, okay, in this test case, I'm going to test the project name. That's why here I'm going to override existing project name with this new value. And after that, I will test like that created project name really has this value. So it will be very readable. I mean, in terms you can open a test case and you can see that you're not like write a lot of different lines of code for generating the data which are you not gonna to test in this particular test case, but you just generate this name or set this name to the generated class, and after that you test it, and it's pretty clear. So it's really good practice, and I can recommend you to follow it. And the next problem is isolation. So this problem is about, for example, let's imagine the situation. We have different test data, as you just mentioned. This test data can be sometimes from a test environment. Sometimes we have special scripts, bash scripts, to set up some data in database or in our sources. And for example, also it's popular situation when we don't have users and we use existing users from test stand. So for example, we use part of data from test stand, also some data maybe from the previous step. In previous step we generate data and we are going to use the same data in the current test, or manually add this test into database. And the problem is that when the data is lost for some reason, the test obviously fails. And yeah, it's like we can see that we have a big lack of isolation here, because every test cannot like run independent. And that's why it's really important that all tests create and clean up its own test data. So, and we create not like some part of data, but actually we create everything from the scratch in every test. And yeah, you can say like, okay, we don't have endpoint for user generation, or we don't have functionality to generate this part of our application. So yeah, that's why we are talking about these important steps from the beginning. So it's actually our work to find this lack of test endpoints, maybe some our functionality for testing purposes, and highlight it, and really try to invest our time and effort to be sure that all this functionality will be implemented to help us to test it correctly in the future. And yeah, so how we can do it? First of all, we can create all API data classes, or as I already mentioned, if we store our if we store our tests next to code repository, we can directly reuse it from the code, because as you remember, we decided to choose backend programming language, so we can just reuse it. And also, several times I highlighted that it should be in one repository, but actually, yeah, if we dive into technical details, it's not necessary to store it in one repository, because we can always use as a Git submodule these tests from another repository, or maybe as a library. So we have technical solutions to do it. So we can create all API data classes or reuse it. And after, we can create general generator based on the model which we already mentioned in the previous step, right? And after that, this generator remember all created models and clean up them at the end. So what does it mean? So we create such functionality where we, in the beginning of each test, we generate all possible test data. And we also keep this information, which test data we generated. And after that, in the end, we just use this storage, which already saved all this information. And we say like, okay, right now it's time to clean up it. So just clean up it. Yeah, and that's why we have also, it's also, we can say, scalability point here, because yeah, we can add new data classes for API, yes, and it will work. It will work automatically. So again, we will remember this information and we will clean up it in the end. So yeah, that's basically it. Um, the next problem that we have, and we slightly move into more like UI problems, other than API. So it's remote run. So for example, it's also quite popular problem, especially for beginners. We run tests on a local browser. Yeah, okay, we can do it maybe for in the beginning for our local tests, but I would recommend to start from remote run from the beginning. So, or we have browser that we store nearby in some folder, like browsers folder, some files which can run browser on our local machine. Or we have some special custom logic, like how in which case we can use Firefox, in which case we can use Chrome, different browsers. But the problem is that it's not scalable solution at all. It's not maintainable solution, or if we can maintain it, but it will be really expensive for us. And it's also not configurable solution. So what we can do here, as I already said, my main advice would be like always use remote browser farm from the beginning. Even when you test just locally your application, because you will catch a lot of problems which are depend on your environment. For example, you spend your time, you just debug your test, everything is green right now, and after that your test will appear in CI/CD pipeline, and you just notice that everything is red for some reason. But in case if you have the same remote browser farm on your local machine, on your colleague machine, and also maybe in CI/CD, so in this case, you can be quite sure that you have absolutely the same environment everywhere. And of course, it will save your time. So what solution can be here? First of all, I suggest you set up a remote browser farm and remote execution. You can use Selenoid for it or Selenium Hub, a lot of different solutions. I prefer Selenoid. After that, you can add the UI interface and the artifact collection. So for example, in Selenoid, you have Selenoid UI, so you can always see what's going on right now with your test. And also you can collect very like simple, quite simple logic. You can collect videos, you can collect all screenshots, all DOM file, HTML, everything, all information that you need to debug your test. And after that, you can configure also browser versions and hour settings, and it's based on configuration files. So it means you can always change it on the fly, but it's also pretty convenient for maintenance. Okay, so the next problem also related to UI tests. Of course, it's locators, and I think you are quite familiar with this problem. So yeah, I think you know that often in projects, locators are constantly changing, and it's quite challenging task for QA assurance engineers to be sure that UI tests are really stable. Also, sometimes structure of a DOM file changes. Or another problem, like for the next level, when identical elements have different locators, so we cannot find them as a collection. And of course, all of these situations lead to the instability and high cost of maintaining UI tests. So yeah, what can I suggest here? Actually, quite basic, but I think the best decision here is to follow one rule. Like if there is no data test attributes on the element, it means we don't have element. And this rules is not only for QA engineers and mostly not for QA engineers. Of course, it's mostly for developers. So how we can do it? First of all, create an invariant. Like we can work only with this particular statement with developers, but every element has a test data attribute, and every collection of element has the same test data attribute. So it's just the rule, and we must follow it because all of us as a development team, we want to create as stable, as efficient, as useful tests as possible. So it's our mission. So let's try to do it. And also, in tests, we should search for element only by attributes, like not by tag, text, or something, just only attribute, that's all. Or in our situation when for example, we don't have attribute, in this case, we should find the part of element which should never change and use only this part. It's possible also, and technically it's also possible. With XPath, with CSS, it's possible. And finally, be strict and demanding for the sake of testability. So here we should really try to spread this information as a rule, as a culture. I hope it's clear. So the next problem also with our UI tests related to using page object and maybe less well known but page element. So what is the problem? We describe web elements in different places. So we don't use some general structures for identical elements. Like, for example, we have element of article on the page, and we can use it as a page element. Actually, we can describe it with some data class or just class, and we can reuse this functionality in all possible ways. Or part of the web elements sometimes is found inside tests when we try to find our web element directly from the test instead of some structure like page object or page element. So as a result, we have a spaghetti code without applying basic patterns like dry, don't repeat yourself, or keys, keep it simple, right? Principles. And what can I suggest here? Also very maybe basic, maybe no, based on my experience. Not everyone follows it, but still. Simple rule, if we have one web page, so it should be one page object class. If we have one web element, it should be one page element. So the same, we can transfer our web element collection to our object collection. Like, it's actually, I would say it's just the same as we do normally with API when we serialize our JSON to some class. And it's pretty the same, but here we serialize our page or our web element to some class also. It's just the most convenient way to work with structures. So what solution we can apply here? First of all, create two parent classes like page object class, main page object class, and main page element class with all mandatory fields and methods which will be applied for all children. So, for example, in page element, it will be this web element. In page object, normally we require to implement open class, to open page. Also, maybe some weightings which are applicable for all pages, some common methods. After that, implement common rules for writing classes. The same as I said before, but for API. We should require the test framework to control the writing of our tests. So it means based on design patterns or based on the possibilities with our programming language, we should somehow to say okay, if you want to create new UI test, you should follow this, and this. Otherwise, the code will not compile. So maybe it's strict, but it works in the best way. So about the next problem. the next problem is configuration. So, for example, we need to run tests locally or with CI/CD. It's pretty basic requirements. And also we have some specific browser to run or specific screen extension. It can be also our parameters. Or for example, our backend URL different on different test stands or different on review app. Review app, it's when you deploy your project directly from commit. Yeah. So as a result, we must modify the code to support all this type of launching our tests. And it's a problem, yes, because we can see it's also not scalable solution. So what we can do here, the best practice is that all configurable launch parameters should be extracted to separated config file, and it can be changeable on the fly. So just basic things actually for any application, but tests is also like some framework, some project applications. So we also should support this functionality here. And how we can do it? Like, first of all, you can create some separated config class that reads the config file from any location in the program. So we can say in any location in our project, like, please use this property from config file. And after that, you can extract all launch parameters settings to this file. What it can be, for example, it can be product version, backend, front-end version. It can be browser, mobile version, or like tablet version, screen resolution, and etc. So after that, you pass launch parameters in different CI/CD pipelines, and yeah, it's like all magic works right now, because you can set up different pipelines. You can say, okay, on this commit, we run after 3 different pipelines. This one on Firefox, this one on mobile version, this one on Chrome, this one for this backend version, this one for this backend version. So it's very, very scalable. Yeah. And our actually last problem, but not least, I think one of the most important, is test documentation problem. So also the popular situation is that tests are not described anywhere at all, or it described manually in some document. So you can assume probably, so it's quite difficult to maintain in this case this document, because tests, especially in the beginning, they like change very fast, and nobody knows the real status of the tests. So finally, again, we have the problem that tests are useless and inefficient. Yeah, and we try to avoid this situation. So what can we do here? Pretty also basic solution, but it's also must have. We cannot avoid it. So all tests should be or must be self-documenting on the fly. Yeah, because it's auto test and it's technically possible. So we shouldn't spend our time for maintaining some like kind of the same, absolutely the same document, but manually. So of course we should invest our resources into this process. And how we can do it? First of all, we should set up a general test report for the tests. We have enough tools for it. Probably the most popular right now is Allure. Also, we can implement an automatic solution for describing all methods. So what does it mean? In all test cases, we use the same methods, some basic methods for API or for UI tests. So we should create some proxy which will automatically describe all these methods or parameters which we use, and to add it directly to the report. So after that, we should generate this test report for each test run. So it should be a part of this pipeline with testing, right? And we should store its history. normally it's like advanced level, but I think we can do it technically. It's not so difficult. So we should also invest our time, because in this case, we can get so many new insights, like about the difference in time execution, difference how, like, in terms of course, flackiness. So we can see all our problems like very transparent in this case. So that's why I think it's really important to invest our time into test documentation. So yeah, it was actually a last problem that I would like to mention. And my main takeaway from this talk is that, first of all, reuse our experience. It's really efficient. And moreover, if you have something to share with our QA, also share yours, because I would like to see more and more our experience. And I would like also to steal something from you. So yeah, if you were looking for inspiration, it's it's your time. Yeah, thank you so much. You can find the slides from this presentation on this QR code. And if you have any question, I'm ready to answer. Thank you so much.
Looks like we have a couple of questions in the list over here. And not only that, we have some spare time. So you've got probably about 20 minutes to fill on some cool stuff. So I'm going to remind everybody, if you have questions for Alex on anything she asked about, please feel free to put them into the chat on in YouTube if you're watching there, or there's also a chat here on the live Restream studio, I believe. Restream, where you can, if you're watching it from LinkedIn, you can ask questions over there and throw them in. Please, as I always say, the only dumb question is the one you didn't ask. So throw anything you like over here. Either me or Alex can certainly take a handle at it. Alex, I'm going to go scroll back over here to one of the beginning ones here. We have an anonymous LinkedIn user has asked, how do you prepare data for API tests? Are you using stubs or are you using real data? How do you solve this issue when working with microservices when there is a change on the back end in several services? Could you speak to that?
Yeah, thank you so much. It's quite a popular question. Yes, so if we are talking about just one service, it's pretty simple. So as I said, we have always some requirements in terms of type for each field. If we are talking about JSON, for example, as a request body for API. So in this case, it's quite simple. We can prepare random data based on type of field. If we are talking about more difficult case in terms of testing several microservices and the integration between them, so in this case, the first layer is to be sure that everything is working on in one particular microservice. And yes, if we test something which is inside this microservice, we can totally generate this data as real data. But if we are waiting for response from another microservice, so in this case, during the testing in one particular microservice, of course, we're using mocks and stubs. So we kind of like pretend when we receive some response, but actually, yes, we don't receive. And on the next level, we invest our time in a specific like integrational test. And in this case, yes, we should really like try to call real methods from another microservice, and after that, we will check this integration. But it should be separated tests, because in this case, if it will be together, I don't know, in one suite, in this case, it will be quite difficult to find the reason why it doesn't work. So yeah, it should be different suites, different layers of testing.
That's a great answer. Thank you very much, Alex. I'll throw in a little bit my 2 cents as well, asking about if you're using stubs or using real data. There is always concern on most of my clients whether you can use real data, because there is PII, personal information, that is concerning. You can generate sample data. As Alex mentioned, there is Faker. Faker is um, a library out there that allows you to generate fake information. By the way, I believe it is community-faker. There's a story you can Google about Faker 666. Which was a very weird story. I can't get into it right now, but Community-Faker is an awesome node package out there for doing stuff like that. I also did mention that there is for creating other types of fake data. There is by the guy who created the Selectors Hub. There is a test data creation tool for generating data. And of course, right now my scroll bar isn't going to go show me that. Here it is. It's called Auto Test Data. If you want to go check that out, autotestdata.com. The other thing I always mention about what data, which is because that's a great question that they come up with, are you using real data or not? One of the most important things I always say is go talk to your service, the actual people who are using your tool, and try to get some of the data from them, because they may know about weird things that you don't know about, you never think about as a tester. It's a great resource. One example I usually give is, what if Pshe breaks her arm, gets checked into a hospital, and Alex, I don't know if you know Pshe, the American singer out here. Have you ever heard of her?
No.
That's
I,
okay.
yeah.
Oh, that's
I just listened today.
okay. The interesting thing is her stage name has a $sign in it. So if you have someone who's still like, oh, I know Pshe, KE $SHA, is it going to go through the database? Is it going to get kicked out? Is it going to cause problems? That's a great way, to start keeping track of data that might be problematic. And the best way to get that is from your actual users who are using your software to do that. Let me see what's our next one here. We had a thing over here from Roman. Roman was teasing me a little bit about me being so old that I'm mentioning QTP, UFT, which is fine. I actually had a job interview just a week ago about it. First one in 6 years. So Roman, yeah, it's not all that popular anymore. But Roman says, if new functionality is implemented in the app and after is needed to be rewrite the entire test automation solution, probably it's not so good a solution. I'm not sure what Roman was referring over there, but I think it had to do with you're talking about reusability of code and being a little bit adaptable. Is there anything you could speak to that about how you handle when new functionality gets implemented in the application?
Yeah, actually, as I mentioned in my talk, that I always try to predict how we're gonna to extend our product in future. And normally we have some plan at least for half of year, so I can always, as I said, to prepare this scalability point from the beginning. And also, I think it's much more easy if we have some in general development culture in the team, and also we can follow some best practices not only in test automation but in general with our product code also. In this case, the probability of situation when something happens and we cannot support it in our test framework quite low, I would say. So yeah, of course, it sometimes it happens when we just have absolutely new functionality and no one expected it. But I would say it's quite rare situation. So yeah, just as I mentioned, it's quite difficult. I think you should practice more if you want to. It's like these tasks during the interviews with algorithms and the data structures, when you should try to solve as many lead code problems as possible to achieve this level, like to prepare algorithms which are scalable. The same here, just try to write down all possible your classes, all possible endpoints, data, tests you're gonna to cover, and after that try to think how you can generalize it, how you can create really elegant solution for it.
Great. Okay, another question here, and we've got testing and tooling out there who's been doing some great stuff, asking questions here. They're asking, how do you maintain the test history report in your current project?
Yeah, I think it's should be delegate to your CI/CD pipeline. So if you use GitHub Actions or GitLab, you can host your reports and test history directly in Page. So if I talk about Allure, Allure has a special functionality to keep your history. If you use something more custom, you also can create the like common dashboard for showing all historical data. Yeah, so I think it should be a part of pipeline and it should be open automatically after pipeline is finished.
Yeah, testing and tooling, I will agree with that as well. With Alex, I've had the same experience where we've got Jenkins jobs where we've run multiple jobs, and the Allure report will actually keep the history. There's a little tweak to that. I'm trying to remember it. I don't think I'm going to come up with it off the top of my head. I'm sure it's Googleable, or you can ask Copilot, ChatGPT will
I
tell
can
you.
say you before it was like you should add your previous report to the history folder manually,
Yes,
and that's all.
it can be automated now. You have Alex has the exact correct answer. I did it 2 weeks ago, and I couldn't remember what was the issue there. She's absolutely right, and you can actually code that into your into the Java, not Java, the script inside of Jenkins in order to have it copy the history in and then start building it. I found it great. The only problem I had was when I want to go back, like it'll show me a history of like 45 runs, but it only actually saves the last 10. And I'm like, trying to click on something. Look, it used to do that. Oh, it's gone. Because I mean, there is a space limitation on that.
Yeah, so backups.
Backups. Tessie and Julie, that is a great question. Thank you so much for asking that. We got Tomas, who's asking, where were you in the case where I'm trying to get these words in the right order here. Where you in the case where you put those front end IDs?
Yeah, I got. So, yeah, sometimes you can be responsible for maintenance of data test attributes on front end part. Yes. Yeah, I was in this situation several times when I was so impatient. Like I asked to add these data attributes, and I was waiting for several weeks. I'm like, come on, it's just two simple lines, and I was like, okay, I will learn how to do it by myself. So yeah, it's quite a good skill to know how to do it. Yes, but actually, a lot of frameworks they generates it automatically, so you don't need to support it. Yeah.
I think what we're talking about, like the data QA, is like a tag that's attached to elements, and then that's generally made to be a static descriptor, so that you don't have to go through ID and other stuff. Am I correct, or am I totally off
Yeah,
base?
yeah, it's like special attributes that can help you to achieve stability of UI tests. Like as I said, this rule, like if you don't have data attribute, it means you don't have element. So yeah.
And the best way to get that done is make friends with your developers. Bring them a pizza every once in a while. You'll be amazed at how much cooperation you'll get from that on that. My last project I worked on was the very first one I walked in. The first thing the developer says is, we put in data QA on everything, and if there's anything you need, just write up a Jira ticket. We will put it in there. I'm like, this is fantastic. It made the job so much easier on that. Let's see. Still got about a few more minutes here. Alexei says, you told that tests should generate and clean up the data. What do you think about cleanup only before tests execute and leave everything in the system after tests run, so we can investigate manually any test failures without any test reruns, i.e., we can launch to account and see if something is really broken there, and what can we do? Thanks.
Yeah, it's quite popular approach. Clean up data not after test but before test, because also like if we clean up it after test, we don't guarantee that when we start new test, we don't know what's happened after that with this environment. So yeah, we can use also and before test and after test and everywhere where is possible. But this case, I would say that yeah, of course, we can try to use data from environment to find the root cause of a bug or of a test failure. But I think the best approach is to collect enough artifacts during the test in your test report to be able to do it only or also without this information from environment. But in general, yes, that's also a good approach. Like the main takeaway is that you just have to clean up data. Yes.
I'm going to also jump in there and say that I've applied this a very similar thing, and I'm going to have to tell Roman this goes back to my QTP UFT days, where I was actually forcing the system to leave the browser open because it would just basically, something would crash and then the browser would close, and I'm like, well, what was the last thing I was looking at? And I changed my framework so I would say, okay, just leave the browser open so we can look at it, and then when we would start the next test, then it would go and say, hey, any of these browsers that got thrown up, clear them all out, in a similar vein as clearing out your data as well. Great answer, Alex. Thank you very much. Let's see. Let's see. Roman says, great point about the flexibility to get info on the roadmap for the product, but sometimes it's good now to get the historical reasons why the functional is needed to update the refactor. I'm going to ask our background uh, our moderator. You don't have to bring up my camera. It's still broken. It's still going to just be a black screen. So there's no point. I'll he, we'll switch over. By the way, we do have our next speaker waiting in our green room, and she'll be on up in just a minute. Ewa is rating back there, so I'm happy to say that. But we're going to continue on a few more questions over here. Ro is asking, do you use Open API Code Gen for working with APIs? I've never heard of that, but Alex?
Is it about test generation based on Swagger or not? Yes, API. Probably it's code generation based on Swagger, right? I think I tried it, and I think it was quite expressive. But only one thing what I was concerned about is it's good thing when you have, for example, Swagger and you have to create your first cases, yes. But it's quite difficult to support it when you already have your firstly generated test cases, I mean API tests, and after that you have some change in your Swagger and how this tool is going to update your tests. So I think it's the most difficult part, and for me also as a person who tried to develop different tools for QA, I also thinking about it. It's difficult task actually, I mean technically. Okay. Yeah. And
Okay, cool. Let me see what else we got over here. If you, this is from an anonymous LinkedIn user again. If you've joined a team and they have been creating and adding locators over the years beforehand, what would you do or say to suggest to rectify this moving forward?
You mean that we have unstable locators and we want to follow best practices, but we have like this old-fashioned way, right? And we should to deal somehow with that, right?
I believe so. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, it's in general quite like long answer. I mean, like yeah, it's difficult to convince people to apply some change to their work. That's true. So you should somehow to express why it's really important and how it will affect the general product quality and as a result the business goals. So if you can do it, yes, in this case, yeah, you will achieve it. But basically normally, like yeah, you should explain how efficient and how useful for us as a development team can be UI tests if they are stable, if also it's like maintainable, and how much money we will spend if it's unstable. just basic calculation. You can also show it to your manager or for person who are responsible for budget for the team. And I think after after all these calculations, everyone will be sure that we need to introduce this locator approach as fast as possible.
Okay. I see Romans basically as responding. It's possible to regenerate on the fly before compilation, I believe, is referring to those locators. I'm going to agree with Roman. In fact, I'm going to do a little pitch. I wish my camera was working, but I did write a book with Larry Goddard, who is our other host every other day. It's an enhanced test automation with WebDriver IO. One of our chapters actually talks about how to write self-healing elements, where if your object property changes or the object type, let's say it was a link in the last release and it's now become a button, its class has changed, that you can take 1 or 2 or 3 shots at trying to get it to reduce your maintenance about 50 to 80%. Beyond that, you have to go in there and just change it by hand, unfortunately. But I'd say 50 to 80% less maintenance is kind of cool. And I'm sure, Alex, you probably do something similar in your projects as well. We've got the biggest trick question of ever from Maruda. This is going to be our last question over here. We got about 3 minutes to cover it. Trick question: how do you measure automation test coverage? Alex, you take it away.
Yeah, a great question. Yes, perfect question. So for unit tests, pretty simple, right? Per branch, per line, different ways. For API tests, a little bit more interesting. We have several tools which are quite not really popular, but you can measure your coverage per endpoint. For example, it's for rest assured, it's rest assured coverage or something like that. You can find this repository in GitHub. It's really cool tool. So it will show you how many get parameters you cover, how many possible status codes you cover for negative tests, and everything is based on Swagger. So if you have Swagger, you can get your test coverage after test execution of API tests, and that's really cool. I found a lot of different lack of coverage based on these tools. So I can recommend it. And for UI tests, much more difficult question, because in general we don't have, or maybe I don't know, really good tools for analyzing test coverage basically just because it depends. Like in API we have Swagger, so we have requirements, and it's in a specified format. So for UI, normally we don't have special format, or it depends on the company. So it's more difficult. We should create our custom solutions, how to read, first of all, requirements. It can be some diagrams, it can be user maps, it can be different things, or maybe checklists. And after that, we should find some way to trace our auto tests and these requirements. So it's really custom solutions, and I wish one day I will develop such tool to do it. It's actually my quite big dream. So I hope one day I will do it. Yes,
Go for it.
my
Yeah.
initial idea, was to do it based on user maps. I think it's the best way.
Okay. I highly recommend everybody go check out Swagger. If you don't have Swagger, get it up there, because it is so hard to go and keep track of your all your endpoints and what's available, what data needs to be passed back and forth, and what your expected stuff is if you don't have it in one central location checked out. And life is so much easier when you've got Swagger out there. So that's cool. For me, I'm going to tell you UI coverage. First of all, I never get beyond 80, 90% of coverage. I look at whatever manual test cases I cover and how many of those have been automated. I can also track by requirement. the one thing that always scares me is when a manager says, okay, well, in your spare time, automate 100% of the test cases and let me know when you're done, hopefully by the end of the month. And I'm like, that is impossible. Alex, I gotta say thank you so much. It's been a real pleasure. We're gonna have you back sometime in the future. This has been a great presentation. I wish you the best of luck and everything going forward into the new year. And thank you for being on the show here.
Thank you so much. Yes, thank you. And yeah, it was really great to talk here. Yes.
Okay. That was Alex Pshe, and I believe she represents in some way. She represents one of my favorite tool companies out there, which is JetBrains. I would have loved to be able to show off something that JetBrains does. I'm going to tell you something. If you get Aqua from JetBrains, I want to give them a little plug over here. They actually have this thing called the ID, the browser inspector. Site inspector, and it actually show you your browser inside the IDE, which I don't think of any other IDE that does that. It's not in VS Code. It's not in Eclipse. It's only in the JetBrains Aqua tool. So if you get a chance, check them out. We do have our next speaker coming up over here. This is Ewa Marchewka. I put too many letters in there. Marchewka. I'm going to get it right. Ewa. Welcome.
Okay.
Welcome to Zappletech. How you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you. Thank you, Paul. So it's really difficult to pronounce my name because it's Marchewka. It's really super Polish name. Yes.
I
But
gave
no
it 4
worries.
shots. Thank you, Marchewka. Okay. I've got that. Cool. Just to let everybody know, if you're joining us right now, usually my camera is working. For some reason, my camera decided as of this morning not to work, and I'm going to be heading out to go get myself an emergency camera after this, so this will never happen again. So a little bit about you over here. So she enjoys presenting at different conferences besides technical ones. Often speaks at soft skills on that, and she also likes to bake bread and cookies and all sorts of cool stuff. Which I like to eat bread and cookies, so that is cool. And in fact, we were just talking about the last thing about doing metrics and stuff, and I tend to mention, like, how do you get 100% automation with 1/3 the size of developers? We're all developers, we're all writing code at about the same speed. How do you keep up with that? Because yeah, be honest, automation is not and really hasn't been recording playback for a very, very long time. You really got to take it seriously. We are a development project. So Ewa, with that, I'm gonna throw it over to you and take it away.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Paul. So let me try to share my screen. Oh, I can even share just one. Wait. Sorry, this is my first time to this. Okay,
That's
hopefully
okay.
this
I'm right
works.
here with you.
Yeah, I'm a manager, so it's not so easy for me to. Okay, yay, it worked. But does it
Awesome,
work
we
full
got you.
screen? Does it work full screen? Yes, amazing. Okay, so I'm ready to go. So hello everyone. As I was so thoroughly introduced, my name is Ewa Marchewka, and for today's speech, I have a topic for you: automated or manual. What can go wrong when a test team starts their journey into the world of automation? Okay, does it work if I change it here? No. Okay, I need to do this, right? Oh, right. Okay, hopefully. Sorry. One few more minutes so that I make my desktop right and I can go. Yeah, so as I mentioned, my name is Ewa Marchewka. I'm currently working as a productization director, which is maybe not super common title, but it basically means that I'm managing a team of around 200 people, testers, mostly testers. I have over 18 years of experience in testing. I started as a tester, and I'm super proud of my testing background. And I really enjoy presenting. I really like giving speeches, both technical and soft skill ones. If you would like to, listen to something interesting, you can see me on Test Dive or HasDev or TestCon conferences. So be sure not to miss those. Here is a short agenda, what I will be talking about. I will start with some common pitfalls. There was a mention about let's automate everything idea, and I would like to tell you why this is not a good idea. A little bit about test environment, unification, human factor, and a real life example how to do it right. I've been listening to the previous speech, and I've noticed that this was fairly technical one with a lot of important details. I hope you are ready for a little bit more high level speech, maybe a little bit more from a strategist point of view than low level details. Before I move on, I would like to add here one more disclaimer. Um, I work in a company that's called Nokia. You probably see, the logo in the corner. That has a very specific test environment. What we are doing, we are testing base stations. So we are testing hardware together with software, and sometimes we are adding third-party equipment on top of it. So when I say automation, it's a little bit different than what you can have in mind when you are thinking about it. So there is a little bit more on the top of it. So maybe for some of you, this will be a very fresh perspective, something that you haven't thought about. Let me know in the comments and we can discuss after the presentation is finished. So let's start with what can go wrong. Usually, when there is a team of manual testers, let's say there is a small company and the company for some time has been growing. At some point, they decided, hey, we are doing a lot of manual work. Let's start automation. Usually, bosses management tends to get overexcited because automation is a super cool buzzword. Automation saves time, automation saves money, so let's automate everything. Let's have a KPI, key performance indicator, for 100% automation. So you can ask yourself, is it a good idea? Those of you who are more experienced probably know the answer, but let me show you, let me tell you, let me bring to you a use case that will somehow maybe make it a little bit more obvious to you. So social networking website use case. This is a real use case. This is something that really happened in one of the companies. So there was a company that decided to create an internal social media, something like Facebook or X or whatever, just internal for the employees, right? So employees would post some interesting, highlights of their everyday work or some important events that happened on one technology center or something like this, right? Something to share with people, some achievements, some super cool projects, etc., etc. So the company thought it is a good idea to introduce something like this. And in order to make it more popular, obviously what management can do, they created a metric that would measure how many times you would post something on this social networking website. And if you would have, many posts, you would get a prize, a cup, or whatever. So, one thing that the managers sometimes forget is that they are managing a team of engineers that are smart and they want to make their lives easier. So there was one guy that decided to automate. So he was smart. So he thought, okay, every time there is a post on this social networking website, I will automatically put a comment underneath it, because comments were the same, counted with the same number of points as the main post. So I will just comment. So he decided that he would say good job or well done or great work under each post like this. And everything worked fine until someone put an information about one of the colleagues passing away. And when there was a good job comment beneath it, um, the management decided to discuss this with the engineer, and he explained what he has done. And they said that he should no longer do it, and they worked a little bit more on the security of the social networking website, so this would never happen again. This story shows that it's never a good idea to automate everything. There are some exceptions. So I told you that we should never automate posts on a social media. This doesn't work. But what else we should not automate? From my experience, user interface, any tests that require checking whether the site looks good or whether the colors are nice or something that really, really requires human intervention. So user experience testing should never be automated. This is something that still, I don't know, maybe in the future AI will take over. But for now, only a human can do a proper user experience test when it comes to colors or usability of the page. Exploratory. From my experience, exploratory testing is the coolest part of testing. You can disagree with me, but this is how I see it. Exploratory testing, meaning when you take your product and try to break it in a super cool ways, it's something that you cannot automate upfront. Of course, if you will find a nice scenario during exploratory testing and you will find a bug, you can automate it later on. But the exploratory testing process should not be automated. Test with unpredictable outcome. If you don't know what is the expected outcome of your test, don't automate it. If you need to, look into requirements or check something somewhere else to make sure that that this test has passed, then it's better done manually. Okay, something happened. Did I stop sharing, or you can still see me and hear me?
Moment, you're back with us. Maybe I think
Okay.
you're out for about 10 seconds.
Okay, so hopefully I don't know what happened, but I'm back, so let me continue. So do it now tests. When a customer is waiting for reproduction of an issue, or where is waiting for something to be done very fast, don't start with automation. You will never do it right the first time, and the customer will be very frustrated that he needs to wait. And last but not least, test with low return on investment. I'm sure that most of you know what is ROI and return on investment, but maybe to have us all on the same page. Return on investment is a measure of the profitability of investment. So whether it is worth doing, whether something is worth doing, whether automating of a test makes sense because it will have a proper return. So we will save time, or we will save money, or we will save something else. The equation for return on investment is pretty straightforward, right? It's gain minus investment divided by investment. However, in testing, it's quite difficult to grasp in details what is gain and what is investment. It can be tricky at sometimes. Here is what I use when we are doing some assessment of newly created manual tests, whether we should automate them or not. So first, obviously, the most important thing that we want to have here is saved effort. So we check how many times do we plan to run the test case. If we plan to run it one time, straightforward, no need to automate it. longevity of a single test. This is important for a few reasons. First, if a test takes quite a long time, the tester's time is also wasted. So if we automate tests that is lasting for quite a long time, we save testers' effort. But we also we also increase usability of a test line. So if we have a very long test and it's automated, we can run it overnight. So the test environment is used all the time. This is also important, especially when your test environment costs a lot. And I will be talking about it a little bit later. So longevity of a single test, increase efficiency of a test environment using our test environment in full. What is our investment? Obviously, script creation. We need to write the script. We need to build or update automation framework if we need to do it. I do keywords, whatever. We need to train the testers. If we have fresh team that's been doing manual testing their whole their lives, and we want them to start automating, we need to take time to train them. Maintenance. It's never, it's never like this that you write a test and it's there 100% of the time and you don't need to do anything, right? You need to maintain it, you need to change it, you need to update it. Something that is very specific for my company and for my test environment is that in many cases, you need to duplicate or stabilize test environment. Imagine having a very big test environment that has, let's say, how do I explain it correctly? So let's say that this test environment consists of two things, baseband and radio unit, right? And the baseband can stay the same, but we need to change radio units to perform the same test on different radio units. If we are doing this test manually, we can just, change the radio unit and repeat it. But if we want to do it automatically, we need to duplicate this test environment, so we don't need manual intervention during test, during run of a test. Same goes for the stabilizing test environment. Test environment can be unstable, especially in my case when I'm working with over-the-air interface between base station and mobile phone. You need to stabilize it to prevent manual intervention during the script running. If the test environment is unstable, the results of your test are also unstable, so you cannot rely on it. So to sum it up, if you are looking from a high-level perspective, like a manager perspective or a test leader perspective, you can summarize this whole return on investment discussion into 3V rule. We automate tests that are high in volume, so we need to run them often. We need to automate tests that have low variance, so we don't need to update them often. And we need to automate tests that have high value. So either the test equipment that we are running them on is expensive, or time of a single run is quite long. All right. Test environment. Now I would like to talk to you a little bit about test environment. So I don't know if this is true, but I can imagine that most of you are working with pretty simple test environment, like PC or UE. I might be wrong, but just for the sake of this presentation, I will assume that most of you works with a environment like this. So that kind of environment is pretty cheap and easy to duplicate and quite stable, right? But if you are working with a complicated test environment, like for example, base station, that has to communicate with a third-party mobile that is not produced by the same company, and there's a lot of third-party equipment like this. There are different UE types, and maybe not only UEs, but other devices that are connecting to base stations. And at the other end, we have a core network that also comes from different vendors. So that kind of test environment is really complicated and in many cases really, really expensive. So if you have multiple complicated test environments, you need to be very careful which tests you want to automate and which tests you want to run manually to make sure that your test environment is used in a proper way, because it costs money, obviously. Another aspect that is really important when you are thinking about automating is unification or framework selection. I know that most probably you have something already in your company that is working, but if if we are just starting, if you are starting automation, if a test team has been doing everything manually, we can we might find ourselves in a situation when we don't have any framework, or we have some very basic in-house automation frameworks that are scattered around the company. So someone wrote something to make his or her life easier, and the same thing was done by someone else from a different part of the company. So we have this wide variety of frameworks, but we don't want that, right? Of course, having different automation frameworks is costly. We don't have reusability in such a situation. We have high maintenance costs because we need to maintain the same scenarios in two different frameworks or more different frameworks. There is no way to port that stuff. So it's a waste of time and money. When it comes to selecting automation framework, you need to take into account a couple of things. The first is obviously cost, and cost of the framework, cost of the licenses, or in some cases, if you want to develop something in-house, cost of the engineer's work. User experience. I'm not talking here about whether the framework is pretty, but how fast people from your company can start to use it. Functionality. You can select the best framework in the world. If it doesn't have a functionality you need, it makes no sense to use it. And last but not least, support. I have been in a situation when there was a framework selected that had no support whatsoever. It was very good, but it was dead. And we had to change it at some point because it wasn't developed. So we couldn't add any features that we needed. Last but not least thing that we need to take into account when we are implementing such a big change, except for selection of framework, making sure that our test environment is selected properly, etc., is human factor. In companies that are managed by engineers, for example, Nokia, because in Nokia usually we grow our managers, so people that have been engineers usually at some point, some of them decide to go into the management path and they become managers. So people that were engineers very often forget about human factor. And human factor is really critical when it comes to change management. So this psychological aspect, when you are implementing such a huge change, moving from manual to automated, can result in pushback. Those are all sentences that I have heard at some point when we were moving from manual to automated. I am a tester, not a developer. I don't want to write code. I'm doing, engineering job down in the laboratory, so leave me alone. This thing is totally unstable. I don't want to use it. It does not have the functionality that I need, and I'm not going to write it. I want it to be there. I have my own. I have written some small framework that works for me. I don't want to use anything else. And I think that this is the worst one. It's faster this way. I am doing it manually. I don't need to automate it because it's faster. And before I write a script, I will already run it. So I don't want it. Those are all the comments from the testers that were doing manual work. Yeah, and this is something that you need to take into account and handle it somehow. So this psychological aspect, if the change management is not performed right, can lead to pushback, can lead to blocking the changes. Team will not want to change their way of working. They would like to stay with the old times. They don't want to move forward. They want to still do everything as they have done it before. So in best case, they will just not accept the change. In worst case, they will proactively sabotage the change. For example, I saw a case when a team was maintaining their own automation framework in secret, even though the selected one was quite different and they were supposed to move to this one. And in the end, the testers might decide to leave the company if they are not happy with what is going on. So for now, I told you how to do it wrong, or what are the challenges that you can see. You can have, a boss that wants to automate everything. You can have issues with selection of automation framework. You can have issues with test environment. And last but not least, you can struggle with team attitude. So now I would like to show you a true story, something that really happened at some point in time. It was some time ago, but I think that this story is still useful to that day. So to set the scene, I mentioned it a little bit before, but to set a scene, what we are testing right now and what we were testing manually was hardware plus software. So the hardware was dedicated. So this is a base station. The hardware is created by the company. The software is created by the company. So you have already some hardware software interaction. Then there is third-party hardware. This is a user equipment, UE or mobile phone or tablet or whatever. It's not created by the company. It's a third party, so it's coming outside of the company. And what gave us big trouble really, over the air interface. As you know, and because you are using mobile phones in everyday's life, you connect to base station through the air, right? So you can imagine similar scenario needs to be tested in laboratory. And over the air interface is pretty unstable. Someone walks by and it's distracted. So if you want, for example, to test maximum throughput of data, it's tricky, right? Because you need to have everything really stabilized in order to automate such a scenario. Because if you do it manually, you see, okay, someone walked by, I need to repeat the test. In automation tests, you don't have that possibility. So what the challenges we had? First, test environment, as I mentioned, unstable, complicated, and on the top of it, it was really expensive. Some environments to test over the air interface is super expensive. You need to build a special chamber or a special tunnel that has absorbing material inside, and you need to log all your test environment in there. And that kind of tunnel or chamber can be really, really expensive. Another challenge we had was the automation framework. There was no unification. We had 3 different automation framework. Robot was one of them, but other ones were in-house built. So they had a lot of flaws. And the last was a human factor. People were reluctant to change because they were super proud of being, manual testers that work with a real equipment and they could use their engineering skills. So they didn't want to change it to sitting in the front of computer and writing a script. So how did we handle unstable test environment? What we did where we could and when it made sense, we changed UEs, third-party equipment, to simulators that would simulate perfect UE, like the one that's acting accordingly to 3GPP standard. Those simulators are also expensive, but in some cases, they are worth it because, for example, they can simulate multiple UEs, so we could test more scenarios. We had dedicated test lines for automated tests. Those were the ones that were supposed not to be touched. No manual changing of a test line so that they are always the same. And we can exclude environmental issues coming from someone, poking around a cable or something like this. And the last thing that was quite interesting and it worked really well was no manual workarounds policy. So we noticed at the beginning that people were writing scripts, automated scripts, but if they were failing, they would go to the laboratory, do some manual tweaking, and run them once again. So we introduced that the policy that you should never do that. You should always make sure that your environment is stable enough to run automated test case without any intervention. Expensive equipment. What have we done with expensive equipment? We introduced a strategy considering a return on investment. So some of the cases were left manual because we figure out it will cost us more to, for example, duplicate the test environment than to run this 1 or 2 or 3 test cases manually, let's say every 2 weeks. Universal solutions. We tried to create our environments as universal as possible so that we can run a lot of automated test cases on the same environment. So we have one expensive environment, but it's universal. It's, for example, serving a lot of customers, and we are running the test cases on this one. We also invested into in-house solutions. For example, for simulators that I mentioned at the beginning, we also created an in-house solution that's much cheaper. Of course, we had to develop it first, so it costs us, but now we don't need to buy expensive simulator from the outside. We are using something that's home built. Now you have unification. So as I mentioned, we had a few different automation frameworks. So what we did, we selected one of them, robot framework, and we introduced a rule that everyone is using it. As I mentioned before, there were people that didn't want to do that. There were people that somehow tried to maintain the old ones because they thought that they were better and that they were used to it, so it was easier for them, etc., etc. But at some point, everyone moved to selected framework and everyone contributed to this one, so we wouldn't waste time. And reluctance to change. I think that this was most difficult one because it's not technical and you cannot measure it. But one thing that was really important when we did that was that communication goes both ways. So implementing. Okay, I think you've lost me for a moment, but I'm back. So I don't know where I stopped, so let me repeat. Implementing useful suggestions. If there was a complaint about, for example, a framework that it's missing something, or about the environment that it's too unstable for automation, then we would listen to those suggestions and we would implement them. For example, we would add something to the framework, or we would keep the tests manual. For some of the engineers that were really not happy with moving into automation, we kept, because manual testing is still needed. It will never go away. There are scenarios that cannot be automated. There are scenarios that should not be automated. So those engineers are still working on, for example, integration. In Nokia case, in the case of a base station, integration is a painful process, and it's almost impossible to automate it because there are so many things that can go wrong along the way that manual integration is better. Writing test strategy, this cannot be automated. Exploratory testing, exploratory tests, as I said, this is like the essence of a tester, inventing new cool scenarios to break stuff. Robustness testing, there's a lot of things that still need to be executed or done manually by a tester. So if someone is not into automation, that's also okay. We'll find a place for him or her. So to sum it up, I'm going pretty quick, but I hope there will be some questions. So if you have them, ask them. If you want to, if you have a team that is, running the test manually, and you want this team to move to automated way of working, there are three things that you need to keep in mind. First is a plan. So you need to understand what your return on investment would be, what tests to automate, what tests not to automate, what everything that will make your road to automation easier. You need to have tools. You need to have a proper automation framework. You need to have a proper test environment. You need to have tools. And the last but not least, you need to have people. You need to have people on your side. You need to have people convinced that this is a good way to go. And you need to have people that are prepared for the change and are okay with it. So thank you for listening. Now I think there's a time for questions. And if you would like to connect with me, here's my LinkedIn QR code.
That was fantastic. We've got a few questions over here. Thank you, Ewa. Let's see. By the way, your presentation was spot on. I've been doing this for 24 years, and there's everything you mentioned I've gone through and had to deal with. One of the mentions out here is that somebody had said that they had a manager who said, I was fired because the boss said, automate everything or goodbye. It's Pama, I believe. And yeah, I try and sit down and try to talk them off the ledge when that's coming. You tell me, how do you deal with someone like that? I'll also throw in some experiences I've had in my life and how I take care of them.
How to, well, it depends. If this person is reasonable and is open to hard evidence, then I would put hard evidence on the table, and I would probably start with a story about this social media, because it puts everything on the table. And then if he or she wouldn't listen, I would give him a bill. So you want to have everything automated. This is how much you need to pay for duplicating test environment. This is how much you need to pay for this and that. And usually when you show money, then the perception changes.
Yeah. That is spot on. I will tell you, 20 years ago when I started my getting serious about this, and that's when they stopped having me doing manual testing and had automation full time. One of the things I found was that we found a bug that would have upset a customer to the point they would have gotten rid of us and put in our competitor stuff. It was actually medical equipment, very expensive stuff. And the bug that I found, they said, well, it only happens once every 64 reboots. So what chance is that going to happen? And not 2 weeks later, as they were teaching a user how to use it, they rebooted it for the 63rd time after the install. And to make it simple, we flipped the switch. The light bulb did not go on. The user was very upset and said, "I want you not to charge me for this. Take it all out and put your competitor in." And all of a sudden, the defect that my team found went from "we'll never fix it" to "we got to take care of it right now." And from that, I calculated how many millions of dollars they might have lost just on that single sale. And yeah, as you said, a lot of minds changed really quickly, going, "Wow, there's a return on investment, and it's millions of dollars, and we're only paying him what, a few thousand? This is okay. We get it. We get it." So definitely, when you're doing your ROI, try to work in how much money you're saving the company by not getting bad stuff get out there and have your customers go to your competitor and lose that way. I do also want to share one other thing. You mentioned that thing, which was funny, was on the social media where it's saying, "We are sorry to inform that somebody's passed away," and the response was, "Good job." I will also tell you, I had a similar experience at it was the same job. I we needed to upgrade our database and build a index of all of our tickets that we had. And the only way I could do that was to add a period at the end of every description that I had. And we had about, I don't know, 10,000 tickets, all tracking the requirements and the defects and all that stuff. So I added a period to it. Of course, the one thing I forgot to do was to turn off the notification. And all night long, my boss's pager got message after message after message. And his wife still doesn't talk to me. She's still mad at me for keeping him up all night. But yeah, automation in some cases can be it's dangerous. I say it's like, you're sometimes I'm just a crazy monkey with a hammer in my hand running around just banging on everything, and sometimes it annoys people. So
can I steal your story? I will give you
absolutely.
credit. I will use it. It's fantastic.
I've got lots of them. Another shameless plug. Some of these stories, I don't mention who the companies are, but they are sometimes mentioned in one of our the book I've got, Enhanced Test Automation with WebDriver IO. So if you want to hear some more of the crazy stories, you can hear that. Or you can go to testtalks.com and Joe Colantonio. Every Halloween episode, I talk about some other crazy story that's happened in my life. We've done it 6 or 8 times. Okay, enough plugging my own stuff over here. Let me see. Oh yeah, I wanted to get back to this. Like, actually, automate everything. When I go and talk to a manager, I come to them and say, "Look, there's a couple of reasons why you can't set this at 100% coverage." You mentioned every reason that is really good out there. Like some things you just can't. It's better off with manual testers. Exploratory testing, absolutely. But one thing I always said is, like, let's set it at 80%. And if I can show that I've automated 80% of your manual tests or 80% of your requirements, that's great. Except it's going to take us time. It always takes us, 3 months, 6 months to get to that point if we're starting fresh. And the problem is what do those developers do? They add more functionality to the product, or the testing team adds more test cases. So we're always going to be behind the 8 ball. We'll never be able to get to 100% because there's just more stuff being added. So I try and keep within that 80% there to say, okay, that's cool. And also, as I mentioned earlier, how many STETs do we have versus the developers? If we all write code at the same speed, we're going to be writing stuff a little bit slower than the 10-person team. If I got 3 people on the team, can I ask you how many people are on your QA team? Is that something I can ask?
Sure. I have around 200 people, including managers.
Oh my gosh. Okay. Well,
That's a big one.
That's got to be scaled agile. If I know, that's amazing. 200. I'm looking to be a project manager. If I get 10, I'm happy. But oh my gosh, there's been times where I've had like 3, and there's 3 people, and the number of developers I've got is 10. So it's like, and how long when did they start the automation? Oh, 2 years after they started building the application. I'm like, wow, am I really behind the ball? This is crazy. Let's see. By the way, we got a few extra minutes here, so if you have any questions, please throw them in up here. I do see a couple have come in since I started telling all these wonderful stories here. Let's see. So Cerdas is asking a question. Already exploratory testing does not any pattern, so we cannot automate till we find the exact pattern. But when we should begin the automation process, when do you
Okay.
think about when? Oh, I know the answer to this one. Go ahead, Ewa.
Okay, so let's see if our answers match. So exploratory testing is something that you just do like, okay, let me try this, let me try that. And you should not automate it upfront, of course.
Yes.
But if you find something interesting, like your base station explodes or reboots or whatever, then it's good thing to automate it. Like the steps that you've used to bring this your product into this stage. So afterwards, yeah, not before.
I'm going to say the question she asked there was I'm sorry, he asked there, my apologies, was when we should begin the automation process. And I'm always saying, yesterday, the day that you started the developers to start writing some code to create your application isn't even done yet. That's the day you should start talking about your automation. And I know everyone says, but there's no application to test. And I say, yeah, that's true, but there are things that you're going to bump into. I call them the Loch Ness Monster, Bigfoot. It's just stuff that you never expected that would happen. And if you can get a jump start on what's going to come your way and you're a little bit more prepared, that works out better, especially if they're just giving you, okay, I've got 2 buttons on the interface. I know we'll have 25 later. See if you can click these 2 buttons. And I'm like, great. There's no text to identify these at all. It's all done in Flutter. How the heck am I going to click this thing? Yeah, sooner
Yep.
the better. You're always going to be behind the ball on that.
Yep. Yeah, if you put it like that, maybe I misunderstood the question a bit. So
Oh,
yeah, I agree that you need to start automating as soon as requirements are ready. Even if code is not ready, you need to start thinking about automation. Maybe preparing some keywords, maybe checking if the scenarios or the use cases provided by architecture are even possible to be tested or are even possible to be automated. So I agree, as fast as possible, as soon in the product life cycle as possible.
yeah. And I think it was actually 2 questions that Serta was asking. The exploratory testing, I absolutely agree with you. Not something you really want to try and automate. There is a brilliant guy out there who says it can be done, exploratory testing and automated. But he's the only guy I know who's ever attempted it. So um, we'll move on from there. AI is starting to become a very big thing. There's generative AI. There are a lot of managers think that's going to replace it. The one pitfall I see managers falling into is that, we can get rid of the manual testers because we have the automation scripts. The problem is that the manual testers also need to analyze the results. You need to have someone out there saying, hey, yeah, there's a problem, and not just have an email account that's getting filled that nobody ever looks at. You're asking for trouble if you're trying to do that. Keep your manual testers, as Ewa said, keep them, have something for them to do. You need them. Exploratory testing is fantastic on that. All right, let's see. Peter says if that manager wants 100%, then run. Yeah. Before you run, sit down with them, try to do the math, and show them, hey, we're going to save you some money. We're going to get to 80% of coverage. And also, a lot of managers, I don't believe that the goal of automation is to find defects. I say that that's more of a byproduct of it. All automation really does is verify that it passed last time and it passes this time. You didn't break anything. If it breaks something, then yeah, there's a benefit of saying, oh, we found that. So cool. Amaruda asks, what do you think about automating deploying, redeploying, installing, uninstalling new releases of the web app that you are working on? Are they good candidates for automation?
From my perspective, they are perfect candidates for automation because customer does it thousands of times. If something you mentioned before about the 64th reboot, right?
Yeah.
So if you have this installing on uninstalling, you do it once in your test scenario, but then the customer has, I don't know, 10,000 sites where he or she will deploy your product, then he or she will do this installing and uninstalling process 10,000 times. So for me, those are the perfect scenarios for automation, because you can do how it's called, repeatability testing.
Mm.
When you do this hundred of times, thousands of times, to make sure that there is no race condition or something. So for me, those basic scenarios, operation and maintenance scenarios, are the ones that should be automated.
Yeah, I think Amaretta is also bringing the idea maybe of actually an older version. And if you can do that, you can say, okay, hey, I made a change to my automation framework and some data. This test did run on the old version. Can I reinstall the old version and run it and still get the same result? So was the break in the change in the application in the new release, or was the change in the break because I pushed something new into my framework and changed some data along the way? I agree with you, Howard. These are great candidates for automation. Um, Obviously, there's automating, deploying, and redeploying. That also talks a little bit about Jenkins. I automate just the deploy of my framework against the app, the systems. So I use Jenkins to do that. I don't run it manually on my own system. You did also mention running things overnight, which is
Yep,
fantastic. So, you don't spend all morning running your test cases, analyzing during lunch. You run them all in the overnight, and then you do an analysis in the morning. You write
exactly.
your test cases in the over lunchtime, and then you go and write up your defects, your tickets. I wanted to mention you covered so many interesting things on here. Um, I will say that there is one thing that I've come across, and everybody says, you also mentioned, is that, what test cases should you not automate? And you mentioned one-offs. I will tell you that I've had one experience recently that has just blown my mind. I had a one-off. It was testing in a way. What one of my companies had done is they acquired another company. They had about 500 new employees, and they needed to test that the names were correct, the emails were correct, the phone numbers were correct. They had a data table, Excel data table of that. And they came to me, of course, they were going live with that Monday morning, and they came to me on Friday and said, hey, can you write an automation script with that? And I'm like, it's a whole new application. I don't know it. I'd have to write all the elements for it. I know it's technically only 6 lines of code to go log in, type in someone's name, check these items, and then go to the next. It's a loop, but I don't know about it. At least in my coded version. But I did have access to a non-coded, a codeless version. It was called Test Rigger, and you could just write it off all in plain English and then just connect it to its data table. I was able to do that in about 45 minutes. And not only is 45 minutes just building it, I found one bug. And of course, this is a one-off. I was able to get the rest of my job done during the day. And then at 11 o'clock at night, Sunday night, everybody got online here. And that's a reminder, I got to talk to somebody in 6 minutes. We got online at 11 o'clock. We figured it would take us about 3 hours, 4 hours to get all 500 of these things validated. And with the automation script, just in the codeless tool, we were able to get it done in about an hour and a half. And we were fixing it on the fly. And suddenly it dawned on me, like, well, you know what? Maybe one-offs aren't really an exclusionary thing anymore. If you can write the test case in a really quick amount of time. So I'm kind of changing my mind on that. Everything else, yeah, keep with the manual testers.
I think that, if you are a smart tester, that this experience, you can use always common sense and decide, right?
Yep.
So the rules are general rules, but there are always exceptions to
I,
everything.
I love your rules that you have in there, talking about how to change things. I've also been where I my first automation project, I ran it for 3 years, built the whole thing. It was my little baby. And then another team from nowhere came in and said, we've had our own automation tool, and we're gonna, take your ideas and see where we can go with them. And I'm like, I had like 25 features over 3 years that, well, okay, we don't do that, and we don't do that. Well, why don't you just use my framework? And I was in the situation where we're like, no, ours is going to be, we already got it approved, so everybody's going to use that. And I went, okay, that's great. And within 6 months, I actually went and found another company and did another wonderful framework for them. So I don't want to say run, don't run,
Okay.
but be adaptable. I like how you put the rules in there in place. And I guess I had to. I'm not sure if that was a great story to tell. It's sorry. I have no filter. I don't think these through when I say them. Let me see. What's the other stuff you had? Oh yeah, we were talking about the manual test, integration, test strategies, exploratory testing is exactly what we needed. All right, hey, let's see. I got 4 minutes. We got we have one more question. We'll make this the last one over here. Kurandi, I hope I pronounced that right. Kurandi is asking where there any knowledge gaps. Were there any knowledge gaps for people who knew and didn't know the robot framework? And if so, how do you bring everybody up to speed or to similar levels and expertise?
Okay, so yes, there were people who knew robot framework, and there were people who had no experience in that. So what we did was extensive trainings. We had both external and internal trainers that would teach people how to use robot framework, and those that were familiar with it, we kind of divided those people into two categories: those that were knowledgeable, that were doing the more difficult work, like creating keywords, and that those people had more in-depth knowledge of robot. And the ones that had like zero to very small knowledge, we gave them trainings, and first they were just using existing keywords for their scripts before acquiring full knowledge and moving to the group that could do everything. So trainings, basically, I don't think that there is another way. Trainings and learning. Yeah.
That's hands-on experience with that is the best experience that you can have. I agree with that totally. In my experience, we've also done lunch and learns, where we just have everyone sit around and somebody says, "I'm going to show you something really cool I did in the framework. I was able to figure out this element, that element, or other ideas." One of my other companies, the most recent one, actually it was two back. They promoted hackathons. They said, "Hey, it's Thursday and Friday. We are giving you permission. Put your work on hold unless it's really high priority. I was losing a ton of money. Put it on hold. Let's do a 48-hour hackathon. Show us what you can do." And that was cool. It actually was visible to higher level management. The downside was it bought us a lot more work. Like, this is cool. It's working now. I'm like, well, this is just a prototype. Like, well, what is it that we need to make it work? They're like, well, give me another assistant and a few more hours. That'd be great. But you got to make it fun. Make this stuff fun. I also recommend everybody out there, if you want to make it fun, if you wanted to learn a programming language and you want to make it fun, there is a company, a website out there. It's called Code and Game. CODINGAME. 22 different programming languages you can learn, and it's got it's got a game embedded in IDE online, and the better your code, the better chance you can beat the game. If you beat the game, they show you everybody else's solution, and boy, are there a lot of interesting solutions out there. It's like, we could do a binary search, or we could try the Pythagorean theorem to try and figure out how to solve this whole thing. I don't know. So just keep it fun, all that stuff.
Yep.
Ewa, I'm going to say thank you so much for being our guest, and it's been a pleasure. We'll also have you back real shortly. It's been a fantastic time. You had really great information, and everybody, I hope you all enjoyed this. I believe next month we've got Larry Goddard back. Remember, me and Larry wrote a book. we're kind of pitching it out there. If you use WebDriver.io, or if you want to read some crazy stories of automation, please check it out. You can get it from Pack Publishing, or you can get it on Amazon. Look up my name, Paul Grossman. Ewa, again, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much for having me.
Everybody have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.